I've got a funny story for you. So I discovered you through, I went through the usual teachers like Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta, Ramesh Balsakar, and then I was on the science and non-duality, and then there was just a little thing that you said, and I just heard what you were saying. I thought, wow, that's really good, that talk that you gave there. So then I discovered your website, and I was trying to find your book to read it, but it wasn't working on your website.
Oh,
so I had
really?
to Google. I had to Google for the PDF in English.
Oh, really?
And then I found the PDF, but I couldn't buy it. So then I took the PDF. I found a book company to print it, and I printed a copy of your book.
That's amazing. I like that.
So I had to make it myself.
Well, it's finally there in English now.
Is it available then for?
No, it's only available in Dutch, but it has been translated, I think, in 7 languages now.
Aha.
And I actually did try to find a publisher in England or US, but well, it just didn't happen. So
Okay.
So it's now as a PDF file.
It's really, and are you getting a lot of good feedback from it? Because I really loved it.
Yeah, it's actually my best-selling book in the Netherlands.
Okay.
So yeah, and they reprinted it with a new design, etc. So it's the shortest book I ever wrote.
Yeah, it's really short, but
yeah.
it goes straight to the point. So I really, really liked it. Oh, that's good. Oh, maybe I can help you to print it in England, because it'd be nice for all the lazy people here to read something.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a 1 hour read and you're done. So
yeah. The most annoying thing about the book is at the end when you say throw it away, because I really wanted to read it again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they say that Advaita is just a concept, but it's the last concept. So even after going through the Advaita, you can throw that away as well and just live.
Wow. And so, do you do much stuff in English then? Because most of the time it's not in English, right? Most of your work nowadays, I think.
Yeah, I did a few things in Dutch, but I got some requests. Can you do a few things in English? So I'm happy talking to you because I like doing things in English, but no, it just didn't happen.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. And how are things going for you at the moment now? Because of maybe we should start actually. So my audience is mainly to do with mindfulness.
Yes,
and,
I saw your website. It looks great, by the way.
Thank you. So it's mainly all to do with mindfulness. And when I share this with other people, they're coming from the mindfulness perspective, and they might have heard a little bit about non-duality, but not too much.
Yeah.
So first of all, in terms of mindfulness, what do you think about mindfulness as a concept and a practice?
I think it's great, and especially in these times where people are so filled with thoughts and stress and anxiety, that to get a little insight in how thoughts actually work, what they are, and that you are not your thoughts, and that you don't have to take them so seriously. I think mindfulness is very helpful for a lot of people.
Okay. And is it something that you've practiced yourself? Mindfulness or meditation?
No, I just went straight for the radical Advaita. So, but I think that they're all. I mean, there are so many philosophies and things to look at it. They're all point to the same. Actually, it's just different routes you can take, and it's just,
so you say they point to the same thing, but if someone comes to mindfulness, they may be feeling stressed, or quite often it's anxiety or depression. Or maybe they want to, be more effective in the workplace and be more focused. So they do the mindfulness, and it kind of works a little bit. I mean, there's brain studies show that it works.
Yes.
So then, why? What is it that something like non-duality, which we'll talk about, how does that offer something different that mindfulness doesn't offer? Would you say?
I think it goes straight to the most radical approach. So it instantly goes for the question, who am I? Because we often think that we are this separate little entity that has to control life and has to be good enough. And so they just remove that first illusion of being a separate individual. And once that is seen, you also can realize that everything simply happens as it happens. So therefore, all the resistance against the past and the anxiety and stress that you get from thoughts about the future can dissolve. And I think in that way, it points to the same, that you realize that you don't have to believe all these thoughts. I mean, we do have functional thoughts from time to time, but most of it is like garbage, what we think.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
unbelievable. So I totally understand also the science behind mindfulness, that once a lot of this noise in your head goes away, then you become more intuitive and more creative. It is just the functioning of the brain. So I think it's very interesting.
Okay, cool. So so I was actually interested in non-duality years ago when I was 20, about 20 something, and I was reading Krishnamurti, not Yuji Krishnamurti, which
he's a radical bastard. I do like watching him, by the way, but
you like it or you don't?
I totally understand a lot of people turn the video off, but I mean, I like the guy. He's so funny to me.
Yeah. He is funny. So I was into it and all that, but maybe I was trying, as a young person, I was trying to get enlightened, I guess. I was trying to get to this final goal, and maybe I didn't get there. And so then I kind of gave up and I forgot about it. And then I just got on with my life and then just sharing mindfulness and meditation. And then I got back into it in the last month, and I found it really mind-blowing when I started reading Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
But quite often these teachers and people who have heard of Advaita, they kind of think that, this is something that may happen in the future, or it might be quite calming for a bit. But what you're calling today radical Advaita, you're saying it's something that is very accessible to everyone. Would you say that?
It is accessible. Accessible. That's for sure. But it is acceptable for everyone. But I don't know what your experience is within mindfulness, but somehow I feel that you have to be ready for it. I mean, you have to be ready to wake up, so to speak. I mean, how is that with mindfulness? Does that work for everyone, or?
What, the practice of mindfulness? No, it doesn't work for everyone. Some people are open to it and others are not. And some people just don't get it or don't want to try it at all.
Yes.
And I think for many people, it's a struggle, actually, mindfulness. So they think it's like exercise. Like, I think I should be doing it because it's good for me, but I'm not able to do it, or my mind is very crazy, and all these kind of challenges come up.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess it's the same with Advaita, is it?
Yeah, and what you see is that our brain changes in two circumstances. It's either passion or urgency. So what I learned in the last 20 years, that most people who get in touch with whatever philosophy, they have an urgency. So they experience a lot of pain. They have like a burnout or a divorce, or they got sick. And this deep crisis is actually a big gift, because that makes you want to look at the world slightly differently. And that's when people start to search. At least that's my experience.
Yeah. Would it be okay if you shared, because I'm sure most people in our community wouldn't have heard of you. Would you be up for sharing your story a little bit about how you went from, I suppose, not being aware of this philosophy to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I remember when I was a teenager, I was already looking for the meaning of life, which I never found, but that's another story. But at least I was in the library I was 15, 16. I was just reading books already about religion, philosophies, and I was just like, what is this? Why am I here? And I studied philosophy after that, and I graduated with an essay on the evolution of the human consciousness. So without knowing it, I got closer and closer to the non-dual philosophy. And then when I was 29, by accident, I was actually driving to the city to buy new jeans. and without planning, I stopped at a bookstore. I went in, I took one book, and it just says, who seeks shall not find. And I did find that funny. But anyway, that was from round 2. And that book was, that was my big opening. I remember sitting.
How old were you at that time?
Sorry?
How old were you?
I was 29 at that time.
29, okay.
So I was reading it in bath and just started to cry, and I was like, I never cry. What is this? So and that's when my whole love for non-duality for the first time popped up, actually.
Okay. And then what happened after that then?
Well, then the ego plays like a million tricks on you. Because then I also had the same thing you had. I have to become enlightened, which is, for the first part, impossible. For the next part, enlightenment is the insight that is not even in you. I mean, it's like telling a wave in the ocean, it's like a wave in the ocean says, oh, I need to become enlightened. And you're like, yeah, but you do not exist as a separate entity. You are simply water. Yes, I know. But once I realize I'm water, I'll be enlightened. Yes, but there's no you. I mean, so enlightenment is a funny story. So, and I mean, I wrote a few books about that. There are so many phases that you can go through while, let's say, waking up from the dream. I don't know. How's that with mindfulness? Do they also have that approach, or are they mainly focused on seeing through thoughts and feelings, etc.?
Yeah, I think with mindfulness, I think because with Advaita and non-duality, there's almost a sense of an ego that you can get, like a spiritual ego, and the people as they become more experienced, you think, oh, they're closer to the reality, and you have some features that you have on the pedestal. And I think unconsciously the same thing may be happening in mindfulness. So you have some people that are into it, and then there's the gurus, although they may not say that the gurus, but they're a bit more experienced and they're more well known. And then they really look up to monks and nuns who are just in the forest, and they're just constantly in meditation, and their mind is completely silent. And that's seen as, we can't do that, but they can do that, and that they have got into some state. Yes. And then when you do the science on them and you look at their brains have changed a lot. So it looks like they have got to somewhere where suffering has ended completely. And here I am at the moment suffering a lot. And I'm gradually moving along that line. I've never thought of it like this, but it's a great question. I think that's what might be happening in mindfulness.
Yes.
Does that sound right to you?
Well, it's exactly, it seems there's a big difference, but I don't think there is, because our brain needs training in order to change. If you want to play guitar, you have to practice a lot, and with small steps, you train the brain. But the same goes from waking up, or seeing through your thoughts, or understanding your feelings and emotions. You can either do that with some practice, like mindfulness, for instance, and thereby you train your brain. But once you use the non-dual approach, it's simply an insight that keeps repeating, that every time a thought pops up and you feel this tension arise, there's the awareness like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to take this seriously. It just goes as it goes. And by that insight, you also simply train the brain. So from a neuroscientific perspective, there's not that much of a difference. It's simply training the brain. And that's also why it needs a lot of time, mostly, in order for things to become more calm, etc. And and also by that, you as a person, or at least the programming of you, changes.
Yeah. So you're talking about waking up, and when you say you kind of go like this, and I don't think people understand what you mean by that. So what do you mean by this waking up? I think some people are in the mindfulness thing would have heard a bit about how some people wake up or get enlightened. What do you mean by this waking up?
Well, our brain plays a funny trick on us, because it constantly creates the idea of you, so to speak. So when you're 1.5 years old, then for the first time, your brain creates self-awareness, or you can call it the ego, or in Sanskrit, it's ahamkara, which means the I creator. So a child that's approximately 1 year old, you can put it in front of a mirror, and the child is aware of the reflection, but it's not aware like that reflection is me. But once you're approximately 1.5 years old, that's when it starts. But as you've been so conditioned to believe in this idea that this is me, that's why the identification pops up. And that's also when people start to feel stressed. Because the next thought is, if this is me, I have to be good enough. It's a big struggle for most people. And I have to control life. And that's when the whole drama in your head starts with all the thoughts. So Advaita points back to that initial idea. Your brain creates the idea that there is a you, that you are separate, while actually you are just energy at play. So life simply happens, but because you think you control life, that's why you feel stressed. And,
Okay.
and to me, it's fascinating that in the Upanishads that were written in India about 800 years before Christ, it has already been written down at that time, also in the Bhagavad Gita, etc. And now, because I'm mostly specialized in neuroscience, they can even show this scientifically, that what they wrote so many years ago, that it's actually the case if we look inside of our brains. So to me, that's fascinating.
That's amazing, isn't it? And do you think they did that by their meditation practice and just observing their own head, do you think?
Most probably, because the insight had to come from somewhere.
Probably not too many brain scans at that time.
No, they had no scientific background at all. And then even when I hear Ramana Maharshi speak, I mean, I'm like, how did he know all this? That's, to me, it's fascinating. And now we can just put people into the brain scanner and we can just see how all this magic happens.
Yeah. So I think people who are into the mindfulness thing, they appreciate that, okay, there is, it's a bit of an illusion that I'm separate, but
a bit of an illusion.
Yeah, a bit of an illusion that's going on. But I'm never going to get rid of it. But I need to keep listening to the teachers, and every now and then I might get a bit of a sense of it. Whereas, what are you talking about with this radical non-duality that you talk about in your book and your talks and stuff? What's that all about? How is it possible to access it right now?
Well, it just goes as it goes for sure at first, but what mostly happens is like people think this is me. From there out, there is the need for control. I need to control life. Mm-hmm. From there out, if things go differently from what you thought, there's frustration. But also you start to worry about what might be happening in the future. From there, you start to panic, you feel stressed. And from there, you want to suppress all these nasty feelings. So you start to buy stuff, use drugs, get a relationship or whatever. So the indirect approach is to look at all this drama that comes from the first initial thought that this is me. So that's also what therapy mostly does. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way, but you look at frustration and, oh, why are you frustrated? How does that feel? No, well, let's investigate the frustration, etc., which is all fine, but it's the indirect way of liberation. And the direct way is to first go through that first initial thought, like, who is actually frustrated? Because there is not even a you. This is simply energy at play in which frustration may arise, but without identification, there is simply a very temporary feeling of frustration and it instantly dissolves. So feelings, emotions, and thoughts are like clouds passing by. But when you identify with this, you take a cloud seriously, and that's when the whole drama starts. So that's why they call the Advaita the direct path.
The direct path, okay. And so for you at the moment, for example, do you have a feeling of yourself as being an individual as well as an insight that everything is just energy?
It's both happening at the same time, because it's a paradox. Because my brain, we can put me on a brain scanner, and then they can easily see that my default mode network, in which most of the self-awareness comes from, it simply functions. And it needs to function in order to operate in daily life, because there are people, they've got a deep personalization disorder. That's when the brain doesn't process the self-awareness in the normal way. And they are in mental institutions, Because there are people in Germany, there's a man, he stares out of the window, and whenever he sees a car, he's like, I am a car. And then he sees the sun, I am the sun, I'm a tree. You know,
Wow.
you just can't function. So our ego, our self-awareness, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a way for the human being to function. At the same time, even although I experience myself as if I am talking right now, at the same time, there's the insight that this is simply happening. Which is the case because right now I'm talking to you, but I have got no clue what I'll be saying in the next first second, you know? I mean, words simply pop out, and after noise comes out, my brain creates the idea that this is me speaking, but it's not me speaking. It is simply happening. And there's a difference because if I think I am speaking, then I feel stressed because I'm like, what will they think of me? Will I be saying the right words? And what if he thinks I'm weird? Or, you know, that's when it becomes not that spontaneous and it becomes inauthentic. But when there's just simply the idea that, well, words are being spoken and it's just whatever, then there's no stress involved. And then it's even fun to talk, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's beautifully explained. Now, one of the things that I found really challenging reading the book, but agreed with actually, and now it feels very free, is the concept of free will. Yes. So most people think of that they have free will, or certainly we all have this feeling of free will. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you say in your book, and some people say, is that free will is an illusion. Now, how does seeing that free will is an illusion, is it something that is, I suppose if it's an illusion, you can't control whether you're going to get this insight or not. But how's your life changed having accepted that insight, that free will is an illusion?
Well, the biggest liberation is that you have got no free will. So there's nothing to worry about. Yeah. It needs to be said that the same with the I, there is actually no I, but there's the experience of an I. And just like you said a minute ago, there's no free will, but there's the experience of free will. So you don't have to deny as if you experience free will. I mean, if I'm going to get a drink, then it's my experience that I can choose between coffee or tea. At the same time, there's the deeper insight that whatever happens will happen. And Ramesh Balsekar had he got it from Schopenhauer, I think. He said, in our experience, the sun moves over the earth. But at the same time, we know that it's the opposite way. So what you experience is the opposite of what's actually happening. So it's both happening at the same time. There is what you experience, and there's the other reality, so to speak.
Yeah. So is it a bit like, I think you might have said this in one of your talks, like with the Matrix, you know, with those two pills. It's as if you've kind of taken both of those pills.
Yes, because why people suffer, they live in the blue pill reality, thinking, like, this is me, I need to control everything, and what will people think of me? And then you take the red pill, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, this is all just, it's a game, you know, it's a sweet dream.
And one of the things that I found really helpful in the way you explained it is this kind of, it's almost like I imagine an iceberg and how our conscious mind, the number of bits per second is very small compared to what's happening in our unconscious mind. Could you explain that a little bit for people?
Yeah, this is from a Dutch professor, Ab Dijksterhuis. I love his book. So he explained, like, our unconscious brain activity is like 11.2 million bits per second. It's insanely fast. But our awareness, what we are aware of right now, is only 60 bits per second. So what is happening in your unconscious part of the brain is like 200,000 to 500,000 times as much as what you are aware of. But you are, of course, you do not know what you don't know. So we have at least the sensation that we make conscious decisions and that we decide what we do. But if you simply look under the brain scanner, it's simply not the case. It's an illusion. But so knowing that, this is also what neuromarketers like, because they now know, like, if we trigger people's brain in this or that way, they will start to buy stuff. I'm not a big fan of that. I think we as Homo sapiens might have a bigger goal than selling stuff, but that's another story. But so they manipulate us all the time on the internet, on wherever you see a commercial, you're being manipulated, because they tap into the unconscious part of the brain. And after that, we buy a product and we really think it's our choice, which is not true.
Interesting. I'd say it's being used massively on mobile phones as well, because if they've got so much information and data,
yes,
it's basically shaping human brains all over the world, I guess.
Yes, I mean, now with the AI is getting smarter than us human beings. So for the first time in history, there is something smarter than we were, and that will have consequences. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, just going back to this free will concept, I actually found it really freeing when I had that insight. But when I share it with anyone, I can't find anybody who agrees with me, to be honest. That's why I had to talk to you, because nobody else seems to agree.
I need a friend.
Yeah, somebody else who doesn't have free will too. Do you find it's quite hard to find people who are willing to accept this insight?
In the beginning, yeah. I've been doing this now for a long time, so I've got so many friends who are to think alike. We know, which is better. And I mean, if you are so identified with being an I, being you, then of course the idea that you are not the doer of you're not the one making your choices might sound a bit scary in the beginning. For me personally, the biggest liberation is that I know that whatever happens in life, it happens. There's no option B. Nothing can be different from what it is. So for me, this is like a big liberation. For instance, I was painting, and I had painted a wall, and I was busy with that for 5 hours, that annoying wall. And I looked at it, I was like, this is the ugliest color as ever possible. So, of course, what arises is like a little emotion, like, bummer, this was 5 hours useless work. But at the same time, there's the understanding, it couldn't have been different. I couldn't have made another choice, because if you think you could have done it differently, you will start to worry, like, I should have picked other paint, or I would most probably blame my girlfriend because she picked the color. And then you would walk around with that frustration for a week, you what happened to me? And so feelings and emotions come up, but they just don't stick to you. They come and they go. It's more fluent.
It's like a very, very deep acceptance, like the ultimate acceptance, would you say?
Yeah, I saw on your website that you do this acceptance and commitment therapy.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend also did that studies. And I think it's so similar to what we're talking about right now.
It actually has an element of it, which is called the transcendent self. So they've done studies on the 6 processes, and one of them they found that is really good for our mental health is to tune into your transcendent self, which is why I thought, oh my God, this links in so beautifully.
Absolutely. Because she was reading a lot from her study material. And I was like, she was like, this is pure non-duality. I was like, yeah, that's so similar.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the other thing is that the founder of ACT, he had a kind of like a spiritual insight at the beginning that got him to research the whole thing. But when he did the research on spirituality at that time, the people thought like 1 in a million people would have these kind of insights of this sense of transcendence. But then as he started researching it more and more, it was actually like 1 in 3 people or 2 out of 3 people at some point in their lives have had this sense that they are not this individual self. They're part of something bigger. And so it doesn't become something exclusive. It's something that's accessible for everyone.
Yeah, also, I've read a lot of also Indian stuff, and it's all like, it's very special to wake up or get enlightenment. And I'm like, but enlightenment, if if enlightenment is your goal, you're in the biggest ego trip, because it's only the thing that thinks I'm separate and I feel tense and now I need to become enlightenment to become a better version of myself. So to me, you don't even have to look for enlightenment, whatever. I mean, it just will happen or it won't happen. And the insight that this I is quite illusionary is something we all can experience instantly. I mean, if a thought pops up, then the question might be, are you that thought? Well, that thought will be going away within 2 seconds. So it comes and it goes. So you cannot be the thought. But who or what is looking at the thought? And then it's awareness, it's consciousness. So within consciousness, everything comes and goes. And if you are aware that you are this consciousness, then consciousness is always at peace. And whatever comes in and out of it doesn't matter. It's only temporary. So it's the movement from I am the separate entity, I am my thoughts, I am my feelings, to this is all awareness in which everything comes and goes. And that's something everyone can get, I guess. It's not that hard.
But I think the big thing for me was that it's not like we feel as if we're one consciousness all the time. We feel whatever we feel, because whatever feelings are coming up in consciousness. And
well, that varies during the day, because in our brain we've got different brain waves. So if you're in beta state, that's also when you're working, when you're mentally active. And that's also when the sense of separation is always present. But if you move through the alpha state, in which we're already more calm and more creative, then that self-awareness dissolves. And if you get into the theta state, that's actually when there's no sense of self. And we have this all the time. I mean, if you are in the movies or in watching a comedy show or doing sports, there are so many ways in which we say we were in flow. And when you're fully focused on the movie, there's no self-awareness. There's not the idea, I am in the cinema watching a movie. They're simply watching the movie. It's only whenever the movie stops and you think, where did I leave my parking ticket? And then you're back into the drama. So many times during our day, we feel totally enlightened because there's the absence of the sense of self. That's why we also love that absence, because it feels great, obviously.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. There's you probably heard of the guy who wrote the book Flow. I don't know if you've heard of. Have you heard of that? Yeah. And so in well-being studies and happiness studies, they always talk about, trying getting into this flow state is very healthy. And even workplaces, they try and do that, don't they? And interestingly, we're happiest when we lose our sense of self. So, and that, I guess, makes sense, doesn't it?
It makes total sense. Yeah, even from a neuroscientific perspective. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's not possible to be in that state all the time, because, like, as you described, you'd end up in a mental institution or something. We need to switch between being a sense of self and losing ourselves.
Yeah, so the sense of self also comes and goes, just like thoughts and feelings and everything in life. But there's always the awareness in which it comes and goes. So so in a lot of spirituality, it's like the ego is a big enemy or something, or also that you have to get rid of the ego.
Yeah.
It's not necessary, because it's just part of your programming. I mean, you also don't have to get rid of thoughts and feelings. It's impossible.
What's popping into my head is your work, actually. I find your work very kind of interesting and unique. I don't know too much about it, but I know that, is it the Netherlands that you're in?
Yes.
Yeah. And you're kind of well known there as a speaker, and you bring in Advaita or non-duality together with neuroscience and comedy in companies.
Yeah.
Do you do that? Do you do that in English as well, or do you just do it in the Netherlands?
No, I do it in English as well. So
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of traveling, but so this year I was in Milan and Barcelona, etc. So I think once every 2 months I go abroad.
Okay. Okay. And can you say a little bit more about what you do?
So what I do is I used to be a comedian, and then I started to combine my philosophy with comedy, and then by accident I ended up being in businesses. So I had to buy a suit and pretend I'm part of that game, which is fine. But I mean, if you make people laugh, that's when the brain opens, you know. So for me, like first making jokes and then giving them a few insights is what always works the best. And I started doing that, and then it suddenly became a success. And now,
Okay.
well, not with the Corona phase, because they canceled everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it not possible to do it online then? These
Well,
experiences?
I do. I did one yesterday, but it's so hard with comedy because I have a lot of interaction with the audience, and they say things back, and you have to be a bit witty, and that's when humor arises. But just talking in a camera is so different. And yesterday, people could write things in the chat box, and then you can also make a bit kind of jokes out of that. But it's never that hilarious as in a real life audience. So
Yeah, I can imagine if they're all muted and you say a joke and they just type ha 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 in the chat window. It's not the same.
now, and I did a Zoom talk, and I with 30 ladies. So I saw 30 pictures of ladies, and it's so funny because you make a joke, and then first there's the delay because of Zoom, and then you see 30 different reactions. It's so weird and so unnatural for me.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it was funny, but I mean, I'm just waiting till I can go on stage again. That's so much more convenient. Yes.
Yeah. I get that. And how far can you go with the insights that you share in companies? I know I guess it can vary from company to company, but can you go as far as saying that, perhaps free will is an illusion, or even your sense of self is an illusion? Can you go as far as that in companies and sharing that?
But the funny thing is, I do mention it, but people don't really get it. So I even show them some scientific short videos. So there's a guy, for instance, who may press on the left or the right button whenever he wants, but his brain scanner measures his brain activity, which means that the neuroscientist knows, even before the guy is aware of it, which button he will press and when he will press the button. So I just show that science, and people are like, oh, wow. But actually, there's hardly anyone coming to me after the show like, wait a minute, but does that mean that I don't have free will? And I even show them like a cat or a dog, they don't have self-awareness, which is hilarious. You can find these videos on YouTube, because if a cat or dog looks in the mirror, it becomes funny, because smart dogs, they look behind the mirror, or sometimes they attack the mirror or whatever. And so I show them that self-awareness is only part of the programming of the brain, but it's not as if you are really separate. And I literally say that, and there's hardly anyone like, hey, wait a minute. This means that there's not really a me. So people come after my talk to me, but that's people who've read my books. So, and they always like, we have a little secret that no one knows. We know we do not exist. And I'm like, yes, don't tell them,
It is just like the Matrix, though, that insight, isn't it? It is a little bit like that.
But sometimes it's like you have a deep secret that no one is supposed to know. Yeah, no, it's funny. And especially, I mean, I don't mean to judge, but in businesses, sometimes people are so identified and so busy with, oh, look at me, I want confirmation, and showing a bit of dominant behavior. And it's hilarious because you see an illusion trying to defend its own illusion. And it makes me giggle.
Yeah. I guess we're all in the same boat at some point anyway. It's the same. It's the way it works, right? It's the way the human brain has evolved to kind of do that.
Absolutely. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it is more liberating to see through all these mental constructions and realize that they're all not true, and all your thoughts and feelings, you didn't create them, and you don't have to take them so seriously.
Yeah. One of the things that I found most challenging, and still do perhaps as well, is how it kind of knocks out a sense of meaning as well. Because of, like, for example, in the acceptance and commitment therapy or training, that's one of the key elements to people need to find their values and move towards that. I don't know if you have anything to share about that.
Well, if you ask a dog, like, what is the meaning of life? I mean, imagine the dog could talk. The dog would say, what do you mean? I just lay here, I relax, I run around a little and I eat. There's this, I think it's a really funny picture. So you see a crocodile and you see above the crocodile, like, eat, survive, reproduce. Then you see a monkey, eat, survive, reproduce. And then you see a human, what's it all about? And so it's only us with our neocortex and our ability to think that comes up with stories like, oh, wait a minute, there's such a deep meaning behind all this, which is also fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with finding meaning and goals, but it's only inside your head, you know.
So is it something that's just created by these stories? So the human brain creates language and it's just totally made up?
Everything's made up. Yes. Every word we say is made up. And so for the awareness itself, there doesn't have to be a meaning because it's all there is. That might be quite abstract, but it's only the human being that wants to find a meaning or a purpose, or also make sure that after you die, that you still be important, or that you will reincarnate or whatever. So it's hard for people actually to see through the illusion of the I, because we've been so conditioned that it's so important who we are, but realizing that you are totally not important is extremely liberating. I mean, just rationally thinking, within 100 years we will all be forgotten. Even this YouTube video will be in some archive, like, oh, there were two crazy people who thought they didn't exist talking to each other. So, and it's fine. I mean, just
yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
But even if there wouldn't be a meaning, I mean, it's like having a party. You can see it in two ways. You can say, yeah, I can go to a party, but it will end anyway, and then life goes on. So why bother going? Or you can go to the party, enjoy the party, and have a good night's sleep. So I'm like, just enjoy the ride, you know? You don't have to be nihilistic or fatalistic whatsoever. Enjoy the ride.
I think that's really important. And one of the things that really I found helpful in your book, Enlightenment for Lazy People, is what the concept of the Advaita shuffle. I don't know if that's your concept or someone else came up with it, but that is the experience that I went through. Because when you suddenly take away from someone their sense of free will, you take away from them all their meaning and purpose and all that. Oh my God, it's a bit of a shock. So yeah. What is that Advaita shuffle, and how does?
I think your description is accurate. It's a big shock in the beginning. It's like everything you believed is like drops, and you're like, but what's next? And what happens in the Advaita shuffle is that you use the concept of Advaita to actually find excuses for everything. So to say, oh, I'm not responsible for anything anymore because I'm just happening. And that's also when people say, why bother going to the party? It's all an illusion anyway. So you try to convince yourself rationally in the same mantra over and over again. It makes no sense. So people become nihilistic, and it's just a phase, but you become nihilistic and you're like, why should I have new things to do? Why should I find a passion? I mean, I think I've had this for 2 years. I'm like, I think I should retire, you know? But actually,
you had that personally. You had that feeling yourself.
Yeah, big time. And so I was coaching a lawyer, and he's like, "Why should I prepare my case? It will go as it goes." And he lost. I'm like, "Yeah, you idiot." So, but it's just a phase of misconception and being nihilistic.
Yeah. Okay, so then it passes. And then, I mean, one thing that came to mind when you were talking about the meaning is that actually, even young children, they don't ask what's the purpose of life or the meaning. It actually happens a bit later on, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if children are playing soccer, you're like, why are you playing soccer? It's meaningless. You just kick a ball and and then you score a
Yeah.
goal and then what? Then you won.
Yeah.
And I mean, and who won? There's not even a you, idiot. You know. But a child will be like, I'm just playing. I'm just having fun. And then when we grow older, we suddenly like, oh, but what's the meaning of soccer? But you don't have to think all about all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And then it becomes so important as an adult that we're not willing to do any actions unless there's this idea of this meaning behind it. It feels empty if we don't have that. It's quite weird, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, we start to unlearn how to play, so it seems, and we suddenly take life seriously, and then we suddenly think we have to make a lot of profit, and the conditioning is quite weird sometimes. It is as it is, obviously, but I mean, I see so many. I don't know. Maybe you've got the same view, but so many people struggling at the moment. Everyone's stressed. Everyone's running around like. Yeah, a little mindfulness won't hurt these days, I think.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It got me thinking actually about the virus, because obviously the virus is completely unconscious, just like a lot of things are, and it doesn't know that it's existing. All the animal kingdom, the whole plant kingdom, they've got no idea what this coronavirus is.
No.
Okay, and young children and babies, they don't have an idea. They just think, oh, we always get these long holidays every now and then because they just think it's probably normal. But a certain many billions of people are very frightened and very scared, and
Yes.
it's interesting how it's all happening. And virus isn't even living, is it? I mean, it needs another organism to actually survive and reproduce. On one level, it's just a bunch of molecules.
So are we. But, well, yeah. I mean, viruses have been there always. I mean, in 1347, 200 million people died in Europe. They called it the Black Death. And then in 1918, there was a Spanish flu. 15 million people died. I mean, that's more than in the whole world, First World War, you know?
Wow.
And now, I mean, if you look at it rationally, it's not that many people that died from this quite mild virus, actually. But first of all, if you're totally identified, you think, oh, I might die, then your brain can't think rationally anymore. The emotional brain takes over and you're instantly scared. And also when the media constantly makes us aware that what might be happening, that they just exaggerate all these things, and then we start to panic even more. So also seeing through that is liberating.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you, this is a concept they talk about in ACT and mindfulness a lot, is the difference between pain and suffering.
Yes.
I think you talk about that as well from a non-duality perspective as well, right? So right now, what would you say is the pain bit and what's the suffering bit with the virus spreading at the moment?
Well, a lot of Indian teachers also made the distinction between pain and suffering. So pain is part of life. I mean, if your loved someone you love dies, there is pain. That's totally at a biological level natural. But when there's the idea that it could have been different from what it is, that's when all these extra thoughts and emotions arise. And that's when you start to suffer. So pain is part of life, and they sometimes say like suffering is optional.
Yeah.
And the same goes from what's happening in this whole corona phase, I think. So it's also, our brain is a quite smart apparatus. So you might be a bit careful about people you meet, or have enough ventilation in your house, stuff like that. But this mental stress that arises, this panicking, that makes when people start to suffer, because you project everything into the future. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if it mutates? What if we all die? And if we all die, then nothing changes.
In some ways, this is a bit of a crazy thought that I had, but you probably will agree with me, in the sense that even the human race, in a way, is kind of like a virus.
Exactly. I said it. I didn't make myself popular by saying that. I said it in another podcast like a month ago. I was like, but wait a minute. We are the virus. And comedian Bill Hicks always said, we are a virus with shoes.
Oh, yeah. I think you shared that in your book.
Yeah. And there's a clip from the movie The Matrix where they explain what cancer does. Like cancer, it just duplicates, etc., and eventually it destroys everything, even itself. And in the Matrix, they say there's one species that does the same thing. I'm like, wow, there might be right. I mean, we duplicate, you know, and also we destruct our own living environment till maybe a point where we get extinct. So you're right. Maybe we are the virus. This is not a spiritual thought, most probably,
but yeah. Well, maybe it is a spiritual thought as well, because if everything is consciousness, then different living things arise out of the consciousness, and some evolve and survive, and some don't. And so, what has arisen out of evolution just 2 million years ago is this thing called human beings, which are just a bit too smart for themselves in a way, but they're not quite smart enough to realize that they're not smart, if you know what I mean. And so, you know, they through all this tribal evolution that's also happening, it creates this sense of separation, and fighting. And it's just, for me, just looking at the human race from zooming out, we're just about surviving. And, you know, a few wrong people in the wrong positions would be really in a big trouble.
Yes, and there's nothing we can do about it. This is simply our programming. But I mean, for 10,000 of years, we would live in small groups on the savannah with approximately 150 people. And that's how our brain is still programmed. So we would eat natural food, we would exercise a lot. And now we live in a society where everything changed. I mean, you walk in the supermarket and your brain thinks like, wait a minute, there's unlimited food. And it's never got used to that. So it's quite natural that so many people are overweight, etc. Because it's a mismatch from our brain. And the same mismatch could be that our desires are endless. We want more and more, and it's fascinating, and we destroy everything around us to get more. And I wonder how far this will go. What's your thought about that?
Well, I think before I read your book, and there was a sense of free will, and there's a sense of, we can do something to make a difference. And so hope arises in the sense of, this could happen or that could happen, and we could make a difference if we work hard enough, if everyone gets together.
Yeah.
And that may still happen, but I'm a bit more, it's a bit of a long shot, to be honest. We had to bet on it because we have, unfortunately, all these countries are sitting there with huge nuclear weapons where, I mean, we've stopped all travel at the moment, but people can't wait to start traveling again to release more carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
So the programming is still there to continue to do that. So we shall see. I like to think that wisdom will arise and start to spread, and these kinds of thinking and mindfulness would spread more. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, it might be. I mean, we often change in times of a crisis, also as humanity. So maybe that's what triggers us to have a few changes in our behavior.
Yeah.
But then again, what Uji Krishnamurti said, you're frozen now. Oh no, you're back.
No, I'm not frozen. I'm just very interested. I'll keep moving. I'm still here.
That would be so funny. Like, Now, Uchi Krishnamurti said, like, if the human species gets extinct, nothing is lost. And yeah, I mean, the only species that find itself interesting is us, you know? Only we worry about it.
One of the things that that kind of helped me to make sense about the world is the fact that, you know, people behave the way they behave. So looking at someone like Trump at the moment, like watching him over the last few years is very, very frustrating for me. But following these insights, it makes sense to me the way he behaves now and the way everyone behaves actually in all relationships. It really has a big impact on relationships, these insights about no free will. Do you find that's the case for other people as well, or yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you can still, part of your programming is that you have an opinion about Trump, for instance. Everyone has, that goes automatically. But seeing at the same time that he cannot do anything different from what he does, that always makes it a bit lighter. I mean, he's most probably has got a narcissistic disorder, and he doesn't choose that. He just operates from out his programming, and yeah, well, this is apparently what life presents, you know. So look at life as a movie. Then he's simply an actor playing his role, and so are we. And looking from that perspective, it's still some frustration or etc. may arise because we're simply human beings, but it doesn't stick to you. I mean, it just comes and then it goes. It becomes way lighter.
Great. Well, it's really great talking to you. I can't think of any more questions, but I'm sure
it was very nice. Thanks.